Thank you for joining me here on the last segment of today's show. We just finished talking about the most surprising and impressive 2-0 teams in the last segment, and now we're going to go to the other side of that and talk about the most surprising, I guess you could say, and most worrisome 0-2 teams at this point in the year. I have a top 5 list of the teams that I'm most worried about right now, standing at 2-0. Like I did in the previous segment, a honorable mention here to me is only one team, and I have the Cincinnati Bengals as my only honorable mention here. They didn't make the top 5 list of me being very worried about them because I thought that I did see some improvement from week 1 to week 2, and also I think their schedule, if I'm not mistaken, gets pretty easy, leading into these next couple of weeks. They have some very favorable opponents that they should get back to at least 500, and with those improvements, with T. Higgins coming back, I feel like they're going to be all right. It's not a situation where I'm not sure if they're going to get better, so they're my honorable mention to me, and I couldn't put them in the top 5, and especially at the number 5 spot, because that's where I have the Baltimore Ravens, a fellow AFC North team. I'm more worried about them than I am worried about the Bengals, because not only do the Bengals have an easier schedule, the Ravens, I think, have the second hardest schedule in the NFL, only second to the Cleveland Browns. And because of that point on, I feel like it is worrisome to have them on this list, but they're number 5 because they have the best team, I believe, out of the rest of these teams that I'm going to mention. So my level of worry compared to these other teams isn't that bad, but still, what I've seen from the Ravens thus far and projections going forward has me a little bit worried, right? Because they have a talented offense, but we just need to see them use all of these tools and know when to use them and how to get the best out of everybody in this very talented offense, right? Because now you have Isaiah Likely, Mark Andrews, obviously Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson, Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman could be a guy for them. They have a lot of pieces that they could use and very much fit into this run-heavy offense, but I still think that knowing when to use Isaiah Likely, when to go to Mark Andrews, especially when to go to Derrick Henry, at what points you use him, and how do you, get even more out of Isaiah Likely based on how good Derrick Henry is. How much does Derrick Henry benefit off of Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews always being in the lineup, right? All of those things, getting everything to be cohesive and work hand in hand with one another, I think that's where they're faltering right now. And it looks worrying because you just gave up a lead to the Las Vegas Raiders, right? You looked pretty well against the Chiefs there in the first game. So off of that performance, you thought you were going to get improvement and win in week 2, but that wasn't the case. So my idea with that, with these Ravens and the idea of them going on, is that I am worried, but they do have a very solid team from that standpoint on. So for me, I wouldn't be surprised if they rectified everything in this next game, but I also wouldn't be surprised if we see more of the same and they could potentially fall to 0-3. So that's the start of my list, right at the number 5 spot. But at number 4, I have the Tennessee Titans. And similarly to the Ravens, these two positions could have interchanged pretty easily, but I think it all just comes down to Will Levis, and I have them ahead of the Baltimore Ravens. A bit more worried about them because the quarterback position is everything, right? They have everything, on their shoulders. A lot of the success depends on them, and Will Levis is such a curious case because his decision making definitely needs improvement, right? There's no reason why he should be making those costly turnovers like he did against the Jets and also the Chicago Bears, right? Those are very bad, unacceptable decisions, right, as the starting quarterback. You saw Brian Callahan get into him and how mad he was, I think rightly so. But in certain moments also where I think everything is drawn up as it should, everything is playing out as it should for Will Levis, he makes some pretty good throws. He flows very well with this offense overall, and I think that point, I like the Titans. I've seen some good out of them from that regard. So if Will Levis can just clean up some of these, just awful turnovers, right? Which is something that seems easy not to do, right? To not throw it backwards when you're halfway down to the ground or just chuck it up, unknowing where the ball is going to end up. I feel like that's all rectifiable and something that could be just fix pretty simply, right? Because everything else more complex, I think, is working for them. So the Titans, if they could figure that out, they have a good team. They should have won in that Bears game. And they also should have at least made it closer with the Jets. They arguably could have won that game as well. So that's why I'm a bit worried about them, just because we're talking about the quarterback. But very simply, they could turn things around if Will Levis can just stop making these boneheaded decisions, and we could see more of the Will Levis that makes the deep throws to Calvin Ridley, right? Throws these nice balls down the field where it could all work out well for them. They're still in a spot where, not all is lost, but I need to see an improvement now because this is back-to-back weeks where he has directly cost them the game. I need to see an improvement next week to really, hone in on the Titans because 0-3 is not where you want to be in the AFC overall. So they're my number 4 team, and then moving on to number 3 is very weird with how these selections play out, right? It's like I'm targeting the AFC South, but I swear that's not the case, but this is where the Colts fall to me because they're number 3 in my opinion because my fears with this team have sort of, come to fruition here a little bit because I feared that the inconsistency or the lack of starting experience from Anthony Richardson last year with this unit, with just overall in his first year in the NFL. I thought that could have come to light in the second year because you really need to go out there and make mistakes, learn what works or what doesn't work, going up against grown men and these defenses, right? I felt like this year we could have seen those mistakes where we could have saw them in the first year now starting to pop up, and where you get the highest of highs sometimes in the game against the Houston Texans, but just this past week going toe-to-toe with Malik Willis, who, no shade to him, just got to the Packers and probably should not have been in this game as much as they were. They end up winning that game in large part because Anthony Richardson doesn't play too well. And as much as I want to point the fact out of Anthony Richardson and the inconsistency that you see from him, this run defense for the Colts has not been very well at all. It's a major concern because they've allowed 159 rushing yards to Joe Mixon, and they were somehow able to be within 2 points of the Texans in that game, right? If Anthony Richardson is making these crazy throws, they're able to stay in games. But when Anthony Richardson is not to that level that we saw in week 1, showing that inconsistency, they put up 6 points, and the run defense gets gashed again for 151 rushing yards to Josh Jacobs. So that all culminated into this idea with the Colts. Their pass catching options haven't been great. I need to see more out of Michael Pittman. He just got a contract, so I need to see more out of him. Alec Pierce is looking like the best receiver out of the whole bunch, and he was at a threat to not even start as a starting receiver. So I need to see more of Michael Pittman. I need to see more out of A.D. Mitchell to kind of help out Anthony Richardson, but he also has to do his part as well. But it isn't top 2 because top 2 to me, another AFC South team, right? Every team in that division except the Texans is 0-2. So I guess it's not too surprising. But for the Jaguars, this offense isn't producing enough for an okay defense to be out there, right? This offense needs to be tremendously better for this defense that is missing their top cornerback, for Darnell Savage, who missed this game as well. Their defensive line is good, but in the back end, when they come up against a good offensive line and that pass rush isn't hitting, it becomes a bit of a struggle, right? And this offense, I think, isn't capable right now to kind of be in a shootout or score more than 20 points consistently, especially with the loss of Calvin Ridley. That hurts a lot, and trying to replace him with a first-year rookie. I really like Brian Thomas, but to put him in this position of having this much responsibility, I don't think that's effective right now, and they're sort of suffering from that. There's not enough also from the running game to alleviate some of the coverage, some of the pressure on some of these guys like Gabe Davis or Brian Thomas or Evan Ingram as well. I need to see more out of the running game, and it's also just more pressure also on Trevor Lawrence to, just naturally, because of who he is, because of the contract that he got, to perform better. I think that adds a bit more of weight on the amount of worry I have for the Jaguars, because they've invested a lot in Trevor already, right? He's going to be their future for the next couple of years, and how that decision pans out is going to be a big decider in how people look at this Jaguars team, how they evaluate it, and if, they're losing games, not putting up a bunch of points, a lot of the criticism will fall on Trevor Lawrence. So they're second, I guess everyone's second in the AFC South right now, being all 0-2, but second place is still up for grabs. It's not like you're trailing behind every team. You're the only team at 0-2 in that division. You're fortunate that the Texans are the only 2-0 team, so second place in that division is still up for grabs. They're not too far behind. They have an opportunity, at least right now, to kind of rectify it, but it's looking pretty challenging right now for the Jaguars. That's why they are number 2, but at number 1, I have the Los Angeles Rams because of the injuries really just derailing this exciting year that I thought we were going to see from the Rams. Their entire O-line pretty much is brand new because of the injury to the starters, an injury to some of the backups as well. And not having your offensive line there is one thing, right? It's almost everything, right, for a lot of teams. But you had Puka Nacua get hurt in week 1, which obviously is a major blow. And now this past week you had Cooper Kupp get injured as well, and he's expected to miss a bunch of weeks, multiple weeks as well. So that's nowhere where you want it to be. The Rams now have no weapons, for Matthew Stafford, and no running game really, because that offensive line is just interchanging. Some people are healthy, some aren't, and it's not a winning recipe. And it's really a shame because, like I said, I had the Rams in the playoffs this year. I thought they were going to compete a lot with the 49ers this year, but it's just an unfortunate part of the game where, injuries like these ramp up so quickly that it just takes teams like this out of it. And that's why I'm so worried about the Rams now, because they're in a very competitive NFC. The level of competition everywhere is top notch, and being 0-2 already with, having your best players be out for multiple weeks now, it could be a very dire situation for them going forward if they don't get some of these guys back, and if they fall too far behind with how the Cardinals are looking, with how the Seahawks are looking, and we all know who the 49ers are. It could be a situation where it's too little too late when everybody comes back, and that's the unfortunate part about it, and that's why I'm pretty worried about them right now, because of the circumstances around their division and their conference. But, that's my list. Hopefully for the Rams, something finally turns in their favor, but for right now, it's been a nightmare start for them with these injuries. But let me know what you guys think of my list. Also, drop your thoughts as well on anybody that I might have missed as well. So that will do it for this segment of the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. Thank you guys for tuning in. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the show, on top of following the network on all forms of social media. And if you want to see more of this show, check out both YouTube channels where you find a bunch of variety in how we cover the NFL with YouTube Shorts and individual segment videos as well on there. And also, remember to tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more coverage around the NFL with some of the biggest news and highlights on here with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Thanking you for joining me, and I hope to see you guys all back here again with me tomorrow. Let's
go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to